And a good summer Wednesday morning. Eagle fans, you got Mac and Mac, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. We got Jenny Mac for the whole show today. No Eagle practice, or at least not allowing the media in, but the media was there yesterday. You were there, John. And I would say that maybe since that ill-fated Sunday against the Kansas City Chiefs last February, we probably had a chance to pick up a little more, learn a little more about the Philadelphia Eagles yesterday than any other day since that loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, because number one, they made some important people available that you guys got a chance to talk to and question. And number two, they actually hit a green practice, Johnny Mac. They practiced with a purpose yesterday.
Yeah, the pads came on. So first day they were allowed, and they did put them on, and you find out more. You really do, because you play football with pads. You don't play it, and so it's this counterintuitive notion. You're not allowed to prepare with pads for safety reasons. We know all the reasons ad nauseum, but yeah, I mean, this is where you find out who can actually play, and who maybe it would be a great flag football player, but not necessarily a great professional football player. So it is meaningful, and you find out a little bit more, and then you see some, Sean Desai puts in the big nickel all of a sudden with the pads, and maybe you start to see some of the thought process is developing on where this team wants to go. We kind of know where they're going offensively. I mean, there's not much change. Obviously, they had to change coordinators, but Brian was here, and it was a successful offense. So you don't fix what isn't broken. You could argue that with the defense as well, but people will argue with you. So it is, it was a big day, and it was a more valuable day as far as evaluation. And that's how the coaches will look at it as well. So not only reporters, but real quick, you said the players, this is a day off for them as well. So no walkthrough today, and they'll get back to work tomorrow. And the first two back-to-back practices, first time Thursday and Friday. So that'll be interesting as well. I imagine they'll have the pads on for at least one of those sessions as well. So yeah, it's ramping up. Acclimation period over.
Over and done with. The actual practice, the get ready for the season practice, not just conditioning practices, started in earnest yesterday. Let's start off the field, but before we go on to the field, Brian Johnson met with you guys before the practice ever got underway. I saw a couple clips from it. You were there. Adding new wrinkles. You don't want to say static. You just mentioned, you don't want to fix something that isn't broken. The Eagles' offense is far from broken. But Brian Johnson does want to put his own stamp on this offense, and he'll certainly do so over the course of the year. But out of the gate, what do you think we're going to see out of Brian Johnson that will be at least slightly different than the offense that they ran the last 2 years with Shane Steichen calling the plays?
I don't think you're going to see much different at all. Maybe a little bit more. As we said, getting the receivers in, getting the running backs in the receiving game from a standpoint of throwing a curveball. Brian mentioned the more points of stress you put on the defense, the better. Everybody knows they want to get the ball to AJ and Devontae, and we saw it last year a little bit with Zach Pascal. Nobody would cover Zach because they're like, oh, we can't cover Zach, and all of a sudden he's running by himself for a touchdown. So the more people you can get involved in the stress, and I do think DeAndre Swift brings a valuable trait in the fact that he can run wheel routes. He can take those bubble screens and maybe make something out of them. So I'm not talking about the dump off game. I'm talking about actual design plays for the running back as a receiver. I think that might be part of the mix with DeAndre. Other than that, it's about evolving, adding more things, as the quarterback gets more comfortable, and he looks very comfortable, and as he processes very quickly. The one thing you can't do is stand still, as you mentioned. You have to evolve because, and I mentioned this on our night show, Football 24/7 last night with Tone DeShields. I mentioned that it's like everybody says it's a copycat league, and it is. But I always say it's a very slow moving copycat league, and they often have to get to the off season to do all the studies and all that kind of stuff. So everybody on the Eagles schedule, they're top dog in the NFC, looking at the Eagles going, how are we stopping this? And they're spent their entire off season trying to slow them down, at least, especially the teams that are relevant in this discussion, the Cowboys, the Giants, the Commanders most notably, but even San Francisco, teams like that, they're focused on what they did. How can we make it more difficult? So if you're just static, they're going to catch up. But if you keep evolving, and I think that's the good part of where the quarterback is. This is 2 straight days, Jody, where 2 straight practices, not 2 straight days, but when the first team has been out there, the ball barely hits the field. I mean, I don't think you can count Jalen Hurts' completions on one hand,
Incompletions.
on one hand over 2 practices. Ball's not hitting the ground, and that's because he's processing quickly. He's making the right decisions. The football's coming out. The football's going to where it's supposed to go. And that's a big positive as well.
And part of that is, and you can tell me how good he was because he told me how good he was yesterday, is Quez Watkins is the number 3 wide receiver. We know AJ Brown is a superstar. We know Devontae Smith is a superstar in the making, and Dallas Goedert's one of the best tight ends in football. And yes, they're going to have an added emphasis on getting the ball in the passing game to the receivers, specifically DeAndre Swift. I didn't know that Quez Watkins had become elite during this offseason.
That's probably not not the word he should have used. But look, I'm not gonna kill the guy for having confidence in himself. Good for Quez. But yeah, I would not have used the word elite.
Yeah, there's confidence and then there's cockiness. There's a difference for me between those 2 things. And Quez got to get a little bit more done before he starts tossing the elite word around.
Well, I'm from the standpoint of players. Confidence is a big thing with players. And I think you saw Quez as a perfect example because I think he lost his confidence last year. And I think Nick Sirianni tried to build it up in the offseason. Maybe it's working. He has been the best of the other receivers, clearly. So for people thinking Olamide Zaccheaus would come in here and be the 3rd receiver, well, it might happen, but over the first 4 days, it's not been close. I mean, he's not pushing Quez at this point. Now, maybe Quez falls apart, and consistency has been one of the problems with Quez, but he has had a great practice on Sunday. Was arguably the player of the day. Made a number of tough catches, and he's playing well. But yeah, I would not have gone down that road. But good for him. He's got the confidence bubbling up. But yeah, I mean, especially in this town where you see literal elite receivers.
Yeah.
Now, there is a big difference between AJ Brown and DeVonta Smith and then Quez Watkins. But Quez is here. That's the beauty. He's here to be the 3rd receiver. And all he's got to do is make the plays when they come to him, like the Super Bowl. Now, he was playing through a shoulder injury last year, so maybe that factored in some of his struggles. But I mean, if he could just make the plays, he's not going to get a lot of traffic, especially now when you add what we talked about with DeAndre Swift potentially. Might even be less traffic. But when the ball comes your way, you got to make that play.
Since yesterday here in Philadelphia, with the Major League Baseball trade deadline being 6 p.m., the Phillies garnered a lot of attention. Eagles almost became a back burner story, which I thought was funny because it was probably the best day to evaluate the Eagles, like I said, since the Super Bowl. But more people paying attention to the Phillies because it was trade deadline day. Well, now the attention focus is back over to the Eagles and their general manager, Howie Roseman. We know that Howie is very good at watching other teams, what they're doing, and waiver wire and stuff like that. He made the trade for GJ right before the season started last year, so he's open-minded on a lot of different things. Third wide receiver now no longer an issue since Quez has reached elite status, Johnny Mac?
No, I don't think they're looking for a third receiver. I think that's way on the back burner for Howie, considering, I mean, it's got to be safety or linebacker first and foremost. Yeah, I think they're comfortable enough with Quez, and if he falters again, the added depth they brought in with Olamide Zaccheaus, I think a lot of people, there's not much better you can do than AJ and Devontae at the top. So, I look at, Cooper Kupp got hurt and with the Rams, and I'm not paying attention to the Rams, but when you look at the depth chart without Cooper Kupp, it ain't good. So to have two is pretty good. It's only, and we talked about a lot when DeAndre Hopkins, people want to build a fantasy football team. Doesn't work that way. Guys like that want the football. They want to be involved. You're not getting that type of player to be the third receiver. So, it's a little bit crossing your finger from an injury standpoint. You certainly hope AJ and Devontae don't get injured. And then they're fine. Linebacker and safety, though, they're not fine. So I think Howie's got more important things to worry about than third receiver.
Fair enough. All right, then let me ask you about that linebacker spot. Because, again, Christian Ellis got some first-team reps. He's been at least going back to OTAs, a off-season darling and making some plays and opening some eyes. Nicholas Morrow, not so much. And we've noted many a time here on the show, just because it stands out, nobody in the league cuts a deal like the one that Nicholas Morrow did with no guaranteed money. And we're talking about a couple of $100,000 here on $1 million cap, but every 100,000 helps with your Howie Roseman doing something like that. If Nicholas Morrow isn't starting, is he departing? Would the Eagles move off Nicholas Morrow and potentially release him? That means Sean Bradley moves up. Other linebackers need to move out. If you're just taking a guy out of the mix, somebody's got to fill the void. If Morrow's not starting, would he be here as a backup, or you think the Eagles would just move on from him altogether?
I mean, as you mentioned, they don't have any guaranteed money invested in him, so they can do whatever they want. They can move on. It's interesting. That was probably the most interesting thing in practice, is that they played a lot, and I mean a lot, of big nickel. Which means three safeties on the field. So in essence, Nakobe was the only linebacker on the field in first team reps. And if that's the plan, and it might be the plan because Sean has done it in the past a little bit, then you start talking about Kayvon Wallace. Kayvon Wallace is getting first team reps. He's getting first team reps at safety, and he's getting first team reps at linebacker in essentially the nickel, where they have three safeties on the field. And they sort of toggled Edmonds and Wallace back and forth. So you don't know who's playing linebacker. You don't know who's playing safety on a particular snap, and you have to figure that out. Now, we're not talking about Ronnie Lott. I see Mike Gill. I was on his show. I mentioned that. We're not talking about Ronnie Lott when we're talking about these safeties. But are they better for that circumstance than Nicholas Morrow or Christian Ellis? Maybe. But I'm not comfortable with either. And by the way, the first two plays, the Eagles rolled out big nickel. Literally, the first two plays, They got gashed on both of them.
On
Kelsey
running plays.
No, Kelsey on passing plays.
Really?
Kelsey was downfield. And I forget who caught rolling out Jalen Hurts, and he just obliterated Terrell Edmonds, who was playing linebacker. And then was the big touchdown from Jalen Hurts to A.J. Brown. It's about 50, 60 yards. Yeah, it didn't look good early. Now, that doesn't mean much, and they just unveiled it. But I'm not comfortable. And by the way, Christian Ellis got more first-team reps, significantly for more first-team reps when they had 2 linebackers than Nicholas Morrow. So he may have already surpassed Nicholas Morrow. But it's going to be interesting how much they use that big nickel. And Sean Desai must like Kayvon Wallace, because I did not see that coming, because he's been, over the past couple of days, way more relevant than I had ever thought.
And hopefully he lives up to the coach's belief in him, if that's the case, if they're going to give him actual reps in safety, not big nickel looks, but when they
both. He got big nickel
both.
looks.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, he was playing linebacker and safety, and so was Edmonds, and so was Sidney Brown, but on the second team. So he hasn't graduated yet. But yeah, they used it a lot, Jody, a lot.
And against a pass, it's supposed to be more effective, because you're hoping that safeties are better in coverage than Nicholas Morrow would be. The worry I would have would be a team would try and run against a somewhat smaller defensive lineup. You're telling me the passes gutted them the first couple reps? Yeah, then they better get some more reps if they're going to actually use it when the season gets underway. We are McMullen and McDonald here with you on Birds 365. It's a Wednesday morning. You know what that means. We're headed down the shore. Our pal Mike Gill from the Sports Bash on ESPN Radio down the shore is up next here on Birds 365.